Thick clouds hovered lazily over the ocean, shading the small island from the morning sun. Warm breezes spread the scent of salt and damp seaweed through cottage verandas and palm-lined pathways. On this isolated stretch of land, known to its inhabitants simply as Kai, time slid by according to the course of the tides. Waves shaped the islanders' days and nights with an unspoken rhythm that had guided countless generations. Their families had fished in these crystal waters for centuries, diving into coral reefs teeming with rainbow-hued fish, gleaning just enough to sustain simple yet content lives. But, like the clouds overhead, a looming threat drifted upon the horizon. The coral reefs weren't faring well, and the island's primary food source was at risk. Many of Kai's inhabitants were so used to their time-honored routines that few noticed the change. But to those who calmly observed the reef each day, fishermen who saw the corals at close range, older women who dove for shells and seaweed, children who splashed in the shallows, bleached patches along the seafloor presented a stark reality. Mottled white surfaces and broken coral branches began to dominate what had once been a living rainbow. Fewer fish darted among the shifting algae. Still, islanders carried on, either unaware or too mired in tradition to know what to do. They believed in the ocean's eternal bounty, trusting in ages of plenty as a guarantee for the future. It was into this setting that the drifter arrived. Early one morning, while the gulls squealed over the beach, one watchful fisherman named Ranu spotted a small figure lying at the water's edge. Rushing closer, he saw a lean young man sprawled in the damp sand, a battered wooden chest half sunken nearby. The stranger's clothes were torn, his hair full of salt and grit. His skin showed signs of too many days under the sun without fresh water or food. With a rush of compassion, Ranu and two other fishermen carried the stranger to the nearest house, the thatched home of Elder Mara. Elder Mara welcomed the stranger inside, placing him on a straw mat, and sent for the village's self-taught nurse. A mixture of coconut water, herbs, and fish broth was carefully administered to rehydrate and reinvigorate him. Over the next day, the man lingered in feverish dreams, babbling about storms and waves, about reefs that glowed under moonlight like underwater cathedrals. Midway through the second night, he awoke with a start, gaze settling naively on the rough, woven ceiling. When he managed to sit up, Elder Mara greeted him in a gentle voice. "I was sure I'd been swallowed by the sea," the young man said with a shaky laugh. "And here I am, in an unfamiliar hut. How long have I been asleep?" "Nearly 2 days," Elder Mara replied. She introduced herself and Ranu, who was quietly waiting near the doorway. "You washed ashore, clinging to a wooden chest." The traveler's eyes flicked toward the corner of the hut, where that very chest rested unharmed. "I was caught in a storm. My boat was lost. I had only that chest filled with my journals and a small supply of diving gear." He fell silent for a moment as though searching for the best words. Then he exhaled slowly and said, "I'm called Ari. I can't thank you enough for saving me." Over the following weeks, Ari regained enough strength to wander about the village, supported by makeshift crutches. Though many kept their distance, at first uncertain how to treat a newcomer with no family ties, his bright smile and thoughtful manner soon won them over. He showed keen interest in their fishing methods, asking countless questions about the reefs and how the islanders guarded them. Ranu and several other villagers indulged these questions, always replying with the same mixture of pride and puzzlement. "We simply fish as our fathers did." Ari, however, was no ordinary traveler. Even from his earliest days walking along Kai's shores, he constantly paused to feel the sand or examine slimy algae caught in tide pools. He talked about a place he had visited far away, where coral reefs were revered as living treasures, and local communities actively protected them. At first, no one took his talk seriously, but over time, a handful of islanders began wondering, could the new methods Ari spoke of help their reef recover? One evening, under the glow of lanterns, Ari stood in Mara's hut, showing her a battered notebook pulled from his chest. Its pages were covered in sketches of coral colonies, notes on water temperatures, scribbles about sustainable fishing techniques. I've spent the last few years traveling across small islands, Ari explained, learning how people live alongside coral reefs and how they preserve them. I wanted to write a guide that could help communities facing reef decline. He paused, a hesitant smile crossing his face. Kaiser's might be showing the same patterns of distress I've seen elsewhere. Elder Mara listened, her weathered face calm but watchful. You have brought new ideas, but people here are comfortable in their old ways, she replied gently. Change is never easy. Perhaps if they understood the danger, they would see the sense in changing, Ari responded, that spark of determination lighting his eyes. Mara patted his hand. Then we must find a way to show them. Not long after, Ari asked if there might be a group of islanders who wanted to learn new techniques for fishing and reef preservation. The time was ripe. Fisheries were under strain, and rumors of lower fish catches had begun to spread. In the island's simple meeting hall, a circular structure near the main beach, Ari gathered whoever was curious enough to hear him out. As it turned out, curiosity on the island was not lacking. A dozen fishermen, a cluster of older women, and a handful of children ambled into the hall. Ari began his talk, voice quivering with a combination of nerves and passion. He spoke of coral reefs as living creatures, pointing to vivid sketches of branching corals, huge spiky anemones, and bright clownfish. He explained that reefs were nurseries for countless marine species, essential for fish populations to thrive. Slowly, as the evening wore on, the onlookers began to grasp the connection. If the coral reefs died, so would the fish, and that would spell the end of Kai's way of life. One fisherman, a skeptic named Toma, nudged his chin at Ari. You've seen other islands do this, you say. So what do we do? Watch the coral? You want us to stop fishing altogether? Not likely. Ari shook his head. No, not at all. But there are methods to fish in certain areas and leave other areas to recover. You rotate your fishing zones, giving coral time to rebound, and the fish a chance to breed in peace. He flipped the pages of his notebook to diagrams of designated reef sanctuaries and no fishing zones. We can create a plan that suits Kai. I know change seems daunting, but if we do nothing, we may lose this reef forever. The fishermen exchanged skeptical glances. Still, desperation had a way of opening minds. They had noticed how their nets returned lighter each month. They heard their families complaining that the once abundant catches of sweet parrotfish and snapper were no more. After murmuring to one another, they finally agreed to give Ari a chance. Their condition: they would allow a small trial zone, a small patch of reef where they would not fish for one full season. They wanted to see results before committing wholesale to the drifters' grand ideas. Thus began Ari's daily excursions. With gear salvaged from his chest, he would dive into the water at dawn, often joined by the curious island children. His mask, snorkel, and small underwater camera became a regular sight off Kai's shores. By midday, he'd return to share what he saw with neighbors. Each day brought updates. Certain coral polyps had turned a darker shade, indicating possible regrowth. Schools of tiny fish would swirl in newly protected zones. He documented the phenomenon with meticulous notes and occasional quick sketches. Over time, Ari's fascination proved infectious. The children floated along with him, squealing in delight when fish darted through their legs. Mothers who had once only ventured into the shallows began to accompany them, gazing in awe at the undersea garden. And fishermen found themselves admitting, albeit sometimes grudgingly, that perhaps their drifter visitor had a point. If the corals recovered, that would be good for everyone. Still, not all hearts were open. Toma, the most experienced fisherman on the island, resented how quickly people were flocking to Ari's ideas. He doesn't know our traditions, Toma would mutter skeptically at the evening gatherings. What's to say that these so-called new ways won't fail in time? The coral always used to bounce back on its own. In truth, Toma's apprehension stemmed from a deeper fear. If they changed too much, would all the old ways vanish? Would the spiritual bond they once had with the sea fade under formal conservation rules? And so he continued to fish in the old manner, just outside the trial zone, ignoring the newly proposed guide. This quiet, passive rebellion caused friction among the islanders, who were steadily growing hopeful. More than once, I pleaded with Toma to meet him underwater to see the difference for himself. But Toma refused. The man would only watch from his boat, lips pursed. Eventually, the turning point came in the form of a crisis. A strong tide battered the reef one night, leaving broken patches of coral scattered along the shallows at sunrise. During that same intense wave action, Thomas' fishing nets drifted into the protected zone, and morning revealed them snaring an alarming number of mature fish and tangling up patches of fragile coral. When Toma, accompanied by Ranu and Ari, swam out to retrieve the nets, they found the reef floor disturbed, large chunks of coral tossed aside like debris. Many fish caught in the net were dead, battered by the rough waters. With lightning in his eyes, Ari tore into Toma at the water's surface. This is exactly the damage we need to prevent. You see how fragile the corals can be in extreme weather. And you left your nets in a place we agreed not to fit. But Toma only gave a helpless shrug, sorrow etched in his features as he saw the carnage. He had never seen so many fish lost with no purpose, trapped in a place that was supposed to be a safe haven. Diving under again to pull away the tangled net, Toma was stunned to see how one portion of the reef that had begun to heal was now snapped and bleached. The spectacle forced him to confront the painful truth of how quickly damage could happen and how difficult it was to undo. When he finally turned to Ari and Ranu, he looked shaken, not defiant. "I see it now," Toma said quietly. "It's as though we've become blind to the reef struggle." After that incident, Toma committed to Ari's plan with a fierce determination. Word spread across the island that the once skeptical master fisherman was calling for everyone to strictly adhere to the no fishing zones. He even led the effort to organize a reef cleanup after every storm. Together, villagers would comb the beach for broken coral fragments, collecting them in buckets while carefully preserving any living pieces to reattach elsewhere. Under Ari's guidance, they established communal coral nurseries, simple underwater frames where small coral fragments could regrow before being planted back into damaged areas. Life on Kai gradually shifted. Ritual morning prayers included blessings for the reef's revival. Families began setting aside time each week to volunteer in reef care, collecting data on water temperature and salinity, or removing debris. Children, previously taught only to fish or gather shells, now learned to transplant tiny coral buds with careful hands. Researchers from other islands never came. Kai was too remote, too humble. But Ari's daily records, stored in his growing stack of journals, served as Kai's own scientific record. With each passing season, hope blossomed like the corals themselves. Where skeletal remains had once dominated, soft new polyps formed, fanning out in gentle pastel shades. Fish congregated in dazzling swarms, lured by the revitalized reef. Whales occasionally skirted the island's deeper waters, spouting as they passed. Thoma observed that his catches outside the protected zones grew larger, perhaps because fish hid in the reef sanctuary to breed, then spilled out to the surrounding waters in greater numbers. The proud fisherman no longer grumbled about change. Instead, he shared his own novel ideas for net designs that reduced accidental coral breakage. During this transformative period, Kai's traditions did not vanish. Rather, they intertwined with Ari's new practices. The harvest festivals now included tributes to the reef, offerings of carved wooden fish or bright flowers placed near the shore to honor the life beneath the waves. Storytelling sessions around bonfires featured ancient legends of ocean spirits, reimagined to incorporate the new covenant between the islanders and the reef. A sense of unity settled over the community, binding them not only to each other, but to the underwater world they had taken for granted. Ari, for his part, wondered if he should stay. He had traveled for years in search of stories and solutions, but never lingered long in one place. Yet Kai felt different. The islanders, so initially wary, now welcomed him with open hearts. He discovered he loved the rhythms of life here, the slow hush of wind through palm leaves, the lively chatter of children who could name every fish on the reef, the pot of fish stew simmering on the fire each evening. More than that, he recognized the significance of what they achieved by working together, a living proof of renewal where it once seemed impossible. As the months passed, talks of a formal reef protection policy emerged. Elder Mara, Toma, and Ari formed a small council to finalize the island's first conservation guidelines. They decided which zones would remain permanently off limits to fishing, which would open seasonally, and which would stay accessible to subsistence fishermen on strict rules. The islanders all gathered in the same circular meeting hall to hear the council's proposal. When the time came to vote, not a single hand rose in opposition. An electric sense of determination filled the air. That night, while the moon danced on the waves, Ari strolled the expanse of Kai's main beach, lost in thought. He knew his dream had become reality, a place where ancient customs blended seamlessly with conscious stewardship of the reef. To him, it was an island of hope that might serve as a model for others. Still, something tugged at him, a restlessness. He had more to do beyond Kai's shores. His journals hinted at hundreds of small islands in dire need of solutions. He felt a moral pull to help them too, just as he had helped here. Early the next morning, Ari sought out Elder Mara, sharing what rested on his conscience. "My heart lies with this island," he said, voice trembling with an emotional weight. "But I feel I must continue my journey. So many reefs need saving. So many communities lack the understanding or the tools. I want to take what we've done here and spread it." Mara nodded, sadness and pride mingling in the set of her delicate features. "We can't keep you here if your calling is to help others. But no, you will always have a home on Kai, and whatever knowledge you have shared, we will protect and grow." As word spread that Ari might soon depart, the villagers arranged a farewell ceremony. They decorated the meeting hall with ribbons made from dried palm fronds. Children gathered coral fragments shaped into patterns that symbolized harmony between sea and land. Toma crafted a small wooden boat in Ari's honor, meticulously carving intricate designs of fish and coral into the hull. The entire community, from the oldest elder to the youngest child, contributed in some way to the boat's creation, ensuring it was watertight enough for a long journey. The ceremony took place at dusk, with the sun dipping low, painting the sky in crimson and gold. Everyone gathered by the water's edge. A tapestry of voices sang songs that spoke of ocean blessings, of shared fortunes, of rebirth and unity. Ari stood near the small boat, chest full of journals strapped to the deck. He took one last look around, memorizing every face in the dimming light. Over the months, these people had become his family. Their hopes were etched onto the reef like living inscriptions of faith. His gaze flicked to Elder Mara and Toma, who stood hand in hand, both offering tearful smiles. "I never dreamed I'd find such a warm home in the ocean's most distant corner," Ari said quietly, raising his voice so all could hear. "What we accomplished here proves that hope is never too far, no matter how lost we feel. The reef lives because you chose to protect it. Carry that spirit forward. Teach generations to treasure what lies beneath the waves. And let's all believe that this is only the beginning." Mara and Toma stepped forward, each pressing a small token into Ari's hands. Mira gave him a scrap of cloth embroidered with the island's symbol, a simple wave pattern surrounding a coral branch. Toma offered one final embrace. "Safe journey," the fisherman whispered, voice gruff, eyes shining. "Come back, Ari. We'll be waiting." A hush fell as Ari nudged the boat into the gentle surf. Children scampered behind, giving one last tug to ensure it launched smoothly. A wave caught the craft, rocking it, but it felt sturdy, solid enough to cross the open sea. Ari climbed aboard, adjusting the small sail and offering a final wave of goodbye. He saw the entire village arrayed on the shore, flickering torches lighting up the twilight. The weight of emotion crested within him, and he blinked back tears. Then he turned toward the horizon, letting the wind carry him forward, away from Kai. For a time, he could hear the singing linger behind him, drifting faintly on the breeze. While the gap between himself and the island grew, the image of those shore-bound flames seared itself into his heart, the glow of gratitude, community, and promise. Ari knew that as he traveled onward, he would carry the essence of Kai's success, an unshakable belief that broken reefs and threatened waters could be revived through knowledge and collective compassion. Weeks later, he found himself on another distant island, then another, each time he arrived empty-handed, searching for local fishermen, seeking village elders, hoping for a chance to share his experiences. He would open his chest of journals, flipping to sketches showing how the corals on Kai had rebounded, accompanied by precise data and encouraging notes. Some communities would dismiss him as a wandering daydreamer, but more often than not, he found at least a few open minded souls, those who recognized the peril their reefs faced and yearned for answers. At every step, Ari thought back to the villagers of Kaitoma's distrust turned devotion, Mara's wise guidance, the children's unbridled joy as they discovered an underwater wonderland. He imagined them continuing to monitor their reefs, planting new coral fragments, celebrating each fresh burst of color and marine life. The memory strengthened him in his ups and downs on the seas. Their story was the heart of his mission. Some nights, on deserted beaches, Ari would pitch a makeshift tent, build a small fire, and pull out that cloth token Mara had given him. He'd run his fingertips over the wave and coral design, letting the bright star patterns overhead recount the close-knit gatherings he used to share with the islanders. On those nights, he pictured Toma leading Kai's fishermen on dawn patrols, carefully circling around the designated sanctuary, or bravely retrieving lost nets. He pictured the children, laughing and cheering as they dove down to get glimpses of newly spawned coral polyps. He pictured Elder Mara, plus the new generation of community leaders, drafting improved guidelines to keep the reef secure for future decades. Thus, the drifter, who had washed ashore in a swirl of waves, barely conscious and empty-handed, ultimately left his greatest treasure behind. On that small, unassuming island in the middle of the sea, knowledge and hope took firm root. Coral reefs, which once seemed on the brink of collapse, found fresh life, fueled by the unity and care of the people who depended on them. This was more than a one-man effort. It was a collective choice made possible because one voice had dared to speak up and a community had dared to listen. And if one day a passing traveler visited Kai's shores, they would likely discover vibrant reefs brimming with colorful fish, the water sparkling with renewed vitality. They might spot villagers wading into the shallows with gentle reverence, or children snorkeling while beaming at the rainbow wonder below. They might see the fisherman Toma teaching newcomers how to protect the corals while fishing responsibly. And they would surely hear stories about a young drifter named Ari who had arrived in the midst of a storm and showed them that the ocean did not merely provide life, it deserved to be protected and cherished. In that knowledge lay the power to restore beauty to the sea and perhaps bring hope to any distant shore. Learning to do the same,